In the age before memory, when the stars bled and empires drawn beneath their own shadows, a question was carved into the bones of dying worlds. Who decides which lives are worthy of the Emperor's dawn and which are cast into the abyss? It is a question whispered still, drifting like ash through the eternal war. Space Marines, the angels of death, carry that burden not as a choice, but as a sacrament. Their judgment is not cruelty, though it seems merciless. It is the execution of a divine arithmetic written by a god too distant to speak. From their fortress monasteries, they descend not as saviors but as verdicts, shaped by oaths older than living memory. And when they land upon a world trembling with fear, the question awakens again, echoing through ruined cathedrals and war-scarred plains. Who shall be spared, and who shall be offered to the fire? The choosing begins long before the first bolt is fired. Librarians commune with the warp, sensing threads of probability, tasting the metallic tang of future screams. Chaplains pace through the shadows, their croziers clutched like a judge's gavel, reciting litanies that weigh the worth of trillions. Every world, every city, every trembling soul is a calculation measured against the survival of the Imperium. Sometimes the answer is simple. The weak are condemned for slowing the march of destiny. Sometimes the answer is cruel. The strong are chosen to die because their sacrifice might tilt fate by a fraction. And sometimes, in the rarest of moments, the Marines themselves feel the cold realization that their judgment is not divine clarity, but a blade forged in doubt. Yet still they choose, for to hesitate is heresy, and to question is to invite madness. The war demands certainty, even where none exists. When the strike cruisers break through the clouded veil of a besieged world, the mortal defenders gaze upward with awe and dread. They know salvation descends, but salvation in the Imperium often wears the mask of annihilation. Thunderhawk engines roar like the wrath of long-dead gods, shaking the bones of mountains. Civilians kneel not in hope, but in resignation, for the coming of the Adeptus Astartes means that lines have been drawn, fate sealed. These warriors, towering and relentless, do not speak to the masses. They observe. They judge. They move through shattered streets like obsidian statues animated by divine command. They see the wounded, the cowards, the defiant, and the desperate. They see humanity laid bare. And in their helmets, ancient cogitators record everything, feeding data into algorithms designed to measure a single truth. Who strengthens the Imperium by living, and who strengthens it only by dying? The first deaths are chosen through ritual more than necessity. A sergeant raises his gauntlet toward a cluster of militia huddled behind barricades of broken masonry. They had fought bravely but retreated at the wrong hour, allowing an enemy breach. In another army, they would be punished. In the Adeptus Astartes, they are marked. The Marines step forward, each movement a decree older than the Imperium itself. They do not kill out of anger. They kill to realign the flow of battle, to cauterize weakness before it spreads. The militia die silently, their eyes reflecting confusion rather than rebellion. Yet among the survivors, something shifts, resolve hardens, fear sharpens into obedience. The Space Marines know this reaction well. It is the ancient calculus of sacrifice. A few must fall so that many will stand without trembling. The Emperor's warriors continue onward, their armor stained with the blood of allies deemed unworthy of the final war. Not all chosen to die are human. Xenos infestations, heretic warbands, abominations shaped in dark laboratories, all are measured, weighed, and condemned. But the Marines' true test is not in the slaughter of monsters. It lies in the moments when the enemy mirrors humanity too closely. A brood of genestealers hiding among terrified refugees. A traitor regiment whose faces still carry the sorrow of recent betrayal. A chaos cult formed not from ambition but starvation and despair. In these moments, judgment becomes a wound in the soul. Space Marines are conditioned to see the universe as a ledger of righteousness and damnation, yet the warp delights in ambiguity. Librarians feel thoughts not wholly corrupted, sparks of innocence buried beneath layers of corruption. chaplains sense regret amid blasphemous chants. But the ritual demands clarity, and the Imperium demands purity. So the angels of death raise their weapons, extinguishing all doubt in fire. Amid the ruins, decisions become harsher. A horde of civilians flees toward evacuation transports, but too many for the limited capacity. The Marines stand unmoving, their visors reflecting thousands of pleading faces. They select those who show discipline, who maintain formation even in terror. Mothers clutching infants are passed over if their panic disrupts order. Elderly veterans are sometimes chosen, sometimes not. Age matters less than resolve. Children are rarely selected unless they display unnatural calm. The others are pushed back, left behind to face the encroaching darkness. Their screams follow the Marines like a prayer gone unanswered. In the aftermath, sergeants record these moments in encrypted logs, marking them under the category necessary losses. They do not speak of them again. And yet, in rare starlit hours aboard their ships, the memory returns unbidden, whispering that even gods in armor cannot escape the weight of choosing who suffers. As night falls on the war-torn world, the apothecaries walk among the fallen. Their Narthetium tools glint under the fractured moonlight, harvesting gene seed from dying brothers, ignoring the desperate grasps of mortals begging for aid. To the Imperium, an Astartes warrior's survival outweighs 1,000 human lives. Even the wounded Marines who cannot be saved are granted swift death, their organs removed with reverence while civilians perish unaided beside them. Some mortals cry out in despair, others in anger, but none understand the truth. Every action the Space Marines take is guided by the distant echo of the Emperor's will. Even neglect becomes a kind of obedience. The apothecaries move with ritual precision, whispering litanies to steal their hearts. They do not touch the dying humans. They do not look at them. Their purpose is singular, and the Imperium allows no deviation, not even compassion. When dawn breaches the smoke-choked horizon, the battle for the world enters its decisive hour. Strike leaders gather around holomaps shimmering with fractured data, identifying choke points where defenders must hold or perish. Here, the choosing becomes cold mathematics. A regiment is sent to guard a collapsing bridge, even though it will surely fall. Another is ordered to storm a fortress filled with corrupted machine spirits, though survival is unlikely. These mortals are not chosen because they are expendable. They are chosen because their deaths buy seconds that might alter destiny. Space Marines understand this paradox intimately. They assign men to their doom not out of contempt, but because the Imperium's survival demands impossible sacrifices. Commanders do not speak apologies. They do not justify orders. They simply point, and fate unfurls like a blade. Those selected salute their executioners, never knowing the truth. Their courage is measured only by the use of their deaths. Enemy warlords often mistake these choices for brutality, believing the Marines kill without restraint. But in truth, the Astartes restrain themselves constantly. There are moments when purging an entire hive city would guarantee victory, yet they instead carve out narrow corridors of survival for reasons only they understand. A librarian might sense a single child whose future matters, though he cannot see why. A tech marine may detect a machine spirit whispering of a destiny tied to a forgotten relic. A chaplain may feel the Emperor's unseen hand guiding him away from wholesale slaughter. The Marines' brutality is not chaos, it is guided savagery, shaped by forces mortals cannot comprehend. They spare thousands who will never know how close they came to oblivion. They erase thousands more who never knew they were chosen. And in the silent spaces between these decisions, a pattern forms, one that hints at a design far older than war itself. As the final bastions of resistance crumble, the Marines advance toward the heart of the conflict. Their footsteps echo through cathedral ruins where stained glass lies shattered like frozen tears. Here, the truth of their choosing becomes unavoidable. War does not merely destroy, it reveals. Cowards become traitors. Heroes become martyrs. Innocents become shields. The Marines see all of it, recording the qualities that determine a soul's worth to the Imperium. A guardsman who stands alone against a tide of foes is marked for elevation, perhaps not to Astartes, but to some destiny beyond mortal understanding. A priest who incites rebellion out of fear is condemned before he speaks another word. These judgments unfold wordlessly, crafted by instinct sharpened across 10 millennia. And as the angels of death climb the final steps toward their objective, they know the world's fate is sealed, not by victory, but by the choices already made. When the enemy's champion emerges a towering monstrosity of warp-forged sinew and hatred, the Marines surge forward with renewed fury. Their judgment becomes an execution of cosmic order. Every bolt round is an indictment. Every strike of a chainsword, proclamation of guilt. The duel between Marine and monster is not merely a battle, it is a reckoning. Mortal soldiers watch from afar, understanding that their own lives hinge upon the outcome. If the champion falls, the world may yet endure. If the Marine falters, all may be devoured. The librarians sense psychic tremors radiating outward, threads of fate snapping and twisting. In this moment, choosing who dies becomes irrelevant, because the wrong death here could doom entire sectors. The angels of death press on, blades roaring prayers, armor gleaming with the blood of creation's failures. And in their unyielding advance, the universe holds its breath, awaiting the verdict of gods. With the enemy slain and the corruption purged, the Marines gather atop the ruins, their armor glowing beneath the dim sun. Civilians emerge cautiously, whispering prayers of gratitude and dread. The world has been saved, but at a cost written in the bones of the fallen. Space Marines do not celebrate. Their victory is simply another line in an endless chronicle of attrition. Yet even now, the choosing continues. Survivors are assessed for signs of taint. Entire districts are quarantined if a single anomaly is detected. The Marines prepare to depart, their mission complete, but the citizens sense an unspoken truth. Nobody truly survives an Astartes intervention, not unchanged, not unjudged. As the strike cruisers lift away, shadows stretch across the ravaged landscape like the fingers of forgotten gods. The world breathes again, but it is a breath tinged with the knowledge that salvation was only another form of selection. In the silence after the war, when only embers crackle in the wind, a lone librarian lingers upon the battlefield. His mind brushes against currents of fate, tasting threads that should not exist. Something in the enemy's corruption was familiar, an echo he cannot place. Among the dead, he senses a pulse not of life, but of potential, as though some presence still waits beneath the ashes, watching. He kneels, pressing his armored hand into the scorched soil. Whispers rise ancient, inquisitive, hungry. They speak not of the lives chosen to die, but of one death the Marines refuse to enact. A life allowed to persist when prophecy demanded otherwise. The librarian's eyes widen beneath his helm. A miscalculation, a flaw in judgment, a deviation in the Emperor's design. The wind howls through the ruins, carrying a final trembling question. What awakens when the angels of death choose wrong? From the moment the wind carried that forbidden question across the broken plains, the librarian felt the world shift beneath the weight of unseen prophecy. The ashes around him trembled with memories not yet born, and the soil exhaled as though some deeper spirit stirred below. He tried to pull away, to sever the connection, but the warp clung to him like the fingers of a drowned god. Visions flickered across his mind, faces he did not know, battles not yet fought, a sigil half consumed by shadow. And behind it all, a heartbeat echoed, steady and patient, as if something had waited millennia to be acknowledged. He rose in silence, but a single truth followed him like a stalking beast. One life had been spared that fate had demanded dead. One anomaly in the Emperor's ledger. And in the Imperium, a single misjudgment could unravel the destinies of worlds. The surviving citizens of the shattered city gathered among the ruins, whispering of omens carried in smoke. They spoke of strange lights drifting through the shattered spires during the night, of voices calling to them from beneath the rubble. Priests attempted to calm them, but even their hymns faltered, trembling with unease. Among the ecclesiarchy, fractures widened. Some declared the anomalies divine mercy. Others decried them as the first breath of heresy. A young confessor felt a chill when he heard a survivor mention a figure cloaked in pale fire who walked unharmed through a battlefield. No Astartes bore such a description. No saint was recorded in that form. Fear seeped into their litanies like mold, eroding certainty. Yet none dared speak aloud the possibility forming in their hearts that something other than the Emperor had moved through the carnage, unseen by marine or mortal. Aboard the strike cruiser, oath-bound ascendant, the chaplains gathered in a shadowed sanctum, the air thick with incense and static. The librarian revealed only fragments of his vision, careful not to expose the full weight of what he sensed: warp echoes, threads of destiny twisted into impossible shapes. The chaplains listened with the stillness of tomb statues, their skull helms gleaming beneath candlelight. Debate simmered, subtle but dangerous. Some believed the anomaly to be a manifestation of the Emperor's will, a sign of a coming crusade. Others sensed corruption, a predator hidden within the prudent silence of the warp. One chaplain leaned forward, his voice a rasp of worn iron, suggesting that perhaps the Emperor was not the only power marking souls for survival. A hush fell. To consider such a claim was to brush the edges of heresy, yet none contradicted him. Not immediately. Below decks, the mortal auxiliaries, those too valuable or too disciplined to leave behind, whispered their own theories. Rumors spread like embers across old parchment. Some swore the enemy champion had whispered a name as it died, a name older than the Imperium itself. Others claimed they had seen a marine hesitate before delivering a killing blow, as though guided or restrained by an invisible hand. The auxiliaries' thoughts churned beneath the surface of duty. Loyalty wavered, not openly, but in the restless way they slept, in the tremor of their prayers. They sensed cracks in the invincible facade of their Astartes overseers. And in the belly of the ship, where the lights flickered and the vox channels hummed with static that almost sounded like breathing, a single question rooted itself. If the angels of death could err, what hope remained for mankind? In the reclusium, a relic began to hum, a shard of sainted armor recovered generations earlier from a forgotten crusade. Its surface glowed faintly, a pulse matching the rhythm the librarian had sensed upon the battlefield. Tech Marines failed to detect a power source. Chaplains failed to interpret its song. Yet the shard vibrated with such insistence that even hardened warriors felt unease. As the chanting of the liturgical rites faltered, an aged chaplain placed a gaunted hand upon the relic. In an instant he was overwhelmed by visions, a figure standing at the edge of reality, neither man nor demon, neither holy nor profane. Watching, waiting, choosing. When he withdrew his hand, smoke curled from the cracks in his armor, and his voice had turned hollow. "The Emperor," he whispered, "is no longer the only judge upon the field." Word of the relic's awakening reached the chapter's inner circle, igniting a storm of doctrinal conflict. The first captain demanded immediate exorcism rites, fearing warp manipulation. The Master of Sanctity argued that the relic might be a beacon meant for them alone. The chief librarian insisted the anomaly be traced, for its resonance echoed too precisely with the spared life on the planet's surface. Voices rose not in defiance, but in dread. They knew the Imperium's greatest weapon was unyielding certainty. Doubt was a toxin. Yet doubt now oozed through command like blood through cracked ceramite. The chapter master himself remained silent, watching the conflict unfold like a surgeon examining a spreading infection. When he finally spoke, the chamber fell still. "We must determine," he said, "whether this presence serves the Emperor or seeks to replace him." Across the ship, letters of complaint and fearful confessions flooded the ecclesiarchy detachment assigned to the fleet. Priests struggled beneath the weight of mortal terror. They read accounts of apparitions drifting through corridors, of vox chants whispering names no mortal tongue should shape. Some claimed judgment felt reversed, that for the first time, they were being observed by unseen eyes assessing their worth. A senior preacher demanded cleansing rituals across all decks, but the rites only intensified the disturbances. Candles warped, flames bending toward invisible currents. Scriptures bled ink that rearranged into sigils unknown. The priests argued among themselves, their faith no longer unified. Was this a test of devotion, or a warning that their beloved Imperium was no longer alone in shaping the destiny of man? And worse, had they failed a test they never recognized? Meanwhile, in the gene seed vaults, the apothecaries discovered something far more disturbing. Among the harvested organs from the fallen Marines, one gene seed bore an imprint, a psychic scar that should not exist. It pulsed faintly, as though marked by an intelligence outside the Emperor's light. The apothecaries attempted to purge the corruption, but the mark persisted, woven into the organ's very essence. If this were reported to the Inquisition, the entire chapter might face suspicion, interrogation, or even dissolution. But to hide it invited a different doom. The apothecaries stood paralyzed between obedience and survival, their oaths threatening to strangle them. In the end, they sealed the contaminated gene seed within a stasis vault layered in sigils of silence, a sin buried, a heresy hidden, a choice made in fear. The librarian, sensing ripples of unrest across the fleet, descended into meditation deep within the ship's warp-shielded sanctum. There, he felt the anomaly more clearly, a presence folding itself around the chapter like a cloak, neither hostile nor benevolent, but profoundly aware. It whispered in the language of tides and dying suns. It showed him visions of battles where angels of death fought not only for survival, but for purpose dictated by an unseen judge. In one vision, he saw the spared soul on the planet's surface standing among ruins untouched by fire, eyes glowing with borrowed light. In another, he saw the entire chapter kneeling before a figure whose silhouette eclipsed even the Emperor's radiance. When he emerged from meditation, the librarian's hands trembled, for he realized the truth. Something was guiding their fates with deliberate, intimate intent. As tensions rose, a faction within the chapter's leadership began to consider a heretical course, contacting the Inquisition preemptively, a desperate attempt to demonstrate loyalty. Others argued such revelation would doom them. Paranoia seeped into every council meeting. Every flicker of warp light felt like accusation. Some suspected the librarian himself had been compromised. Others believed the chaplains were suppressing forbidden knowledge. Unity decayed into silent hostility. The Marines performed their duties with outward precision, yet beneath their armor, faith eroded grain by grain. The chapter had stood for 10 millennia, unbroken by war, unshaken by Xeno's horrors, yet now it faltered beneath a whisper, an unseen influence. A single spared life. And as fear deepened, so too did the suspicion that their loyalty to the Emperor might soon require them to choose whom among their own would die to preserve purity. Then, without warning, the strike cruiser shuddered. Vox channels screamed with distortion as every lumen aboard flickered into darkness. A siren wailed, one reserved only for warp breach. But this was no demonic incursion. The hull did not buckle. The Geller field did not rupture. Instead, a soft radiant glow spread through the corridors, illuminating every bolt, every scripture, every trembling soul. The relic in the reclusium ignited, releasing a beam of impossible light. It cut through bulkheads, through armor, through doubt, pointing toward a single chamber deep within the ship, the stasis vault, the one containing the corrupted gene seed. The vault door opened on its own, seals screaming as though in agony. And within that chamber, something stirred, something that should not have had the strength to move, yet rose as though awakened by destiny's hand. The apothecaries, the librarian, the chaplains, and the chapter master converged upon the chamber as one, weapons raised, faith trembling. What they saw inside froze every warrior in absolute silence. The corrupted gene seed pulsed, no longer inert, no longer dormant. From its glow emerged a silhouette forming within the stasis field, neither marine nor demon, but something caught between creation and blasphemy. Its eyes opened slowly, reflecting starfire and ruin. And in a voice that carried the echo of every soul judged on the battlefield below, it whispered a truth that shattered the last remnants of certainty. I was chosen, but not by him. From the moment the creature spoke those impossible words, silence descended upon the chamber like a cosmic grave shroud. The stasis field flickered as if struggling to contain a being that was no longer bound by the limitations of flesh or decree. The chaplains chanted litanies through clenched teeth, their voices cracking with a fear they dared not acknowledge. The librarian felt the warp bend inward, as though the very fabric of reality strained to observe this abomination born from their own blood. The chapter master, who had weathered 10,000 wars without flinching, felt his faith fracture. For if something had chosen this being, something other than their god emperor, then the universe was governed by laws far older and far less merciful than they had believed. And beneath that suffocating silence, every marine felt judgment weighing upon them. Not from above, but from within. Across the ship, the psychic shockwave rippled like a silent scream. Battle brothers collapsed mid-prayer, clutching their skulls as memories not their own flooded their minds. Fragments of lives never lived, wars fought in realities that never were. A young scout saw visions of ancient stars collapsing into hungry voids, each devouring civilizations whose names he did not recognize. A veteran sergeant witnessed himself cut down by an enemy he had not yet met. Mortals wailed in terror as the hull vibrated with an inhuman heartbeat echoing from the depths of the warp. Priests attempted to drown the psychic static with hymns, but their voices trembled under the weight of a revelation they could not yet comprehend. The ship itself seemed to inhale, metal contracting as though frightened. The anomaly had awakened, and its awakening reverberated through every soul aboard like the tolling of a funeral bell. The librarian reached into the warp, trying to anchor his mind against the rising tide. Instead, he was consumed by a vision so vast it eclipsed his sense of self. He saw a battlefield suspended in nothingness, where titanic figures carved from starlight clashed in silence. Their blows did not generate sound but rewritten destiny. One figure bore the unmistakable silhouette of the Emperor Radiant, massive, immutable. But opposite him stood another, faceless and shifting, its form built not from light, but from possibility. Between them lay a ledger of fate, written in languages older than the galaxy. And upon that ledger, the librarian saw an entry appear, the spared life, the one anomaly that had triggered the unraveling. When he returned to himself, gasping, he understood the truth with horrifying clarity. The Emperor was not the only architect of mankind's destiny. He had never been. In the reclusium, the relic continued to glow, projecting images against the towering statues of saints. Priests gathered, trembling, as the light revealed scenes erased from recorded history. They saw the Emperor kneeling before a council of beings made from pure consciousness, their forms shifting like ripples on a sunlit ocean. They saw him reject their guidance, choosing instead to forge humanity's future alone. And they saw, with growing horror, one among those beings turn away from the council and follow him, unseen, unacknowledged, but eternally present. A shadow beside a god, a judge beside a king. The priests fell to their knees, some in worship, others in despair. For the revelation shattered the heart of imperial doctrine. Humanity had never served one master. Their devotion had been split since the dawn of time, divided between light and something far more ambiguous. In the gene vaults, the apothecaries surrounded the entity's forming body, their hands trembling despite a lifetime of discipline. The creature's features still coalesced, shifting like liquid starlight into a shape that resembled a space marine, but impossibly refined, sculpted from ideals rather than flesh. Its armor seemed grown rather than forged, threaded with veins of pale luminescence. It opened its eyes once more, and the apothecaries felt their breath stolen as they beheld irises that reflected not color, but entire galaxies collapsing in slow motion. "Do not fear," it whispered, its voice echoing within their skulls. "You were always meant to witness this." But the apothecaries did fear, for the creature did not radiate corruption. It radiated purpose. And purpose, when unbound from the Emperor's light, was more terrifying than any demon. The chapter master confronted the entity, bolter raised, faith shaking like a flame in a storm. "Name yourself," he commanded, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. The being stepped forward, the stasis field dissolving around it like frost meeting sun. "I have been called many things by those who could sense me," it answered. "The Echo, the Watcher, the shadow that walks with kings." Its gaze shifted, piercing the master's soul with unbearable clarity. "But by the Emperor." It paused, and for a heartbeat, the universe seemed to hold its breath. "He called me his reflection." The Marines recoiled as though struck. To imply equivalence with the Emperor was heresy beyond measure. Yet the creature did not boast, it mourned. And that grief was more frightening than pride. As the chapter reeled, a violent rift tore through the ship, an eruption of warp lightning that did not breach reality, but rewrote it. Walls dissolved into visions of ancient battles, and warriors found themselves walking through memories not their own. A tactical marine suddenly stood amid the burning ruins of old Earth, watching proto-legions clash beneath thunderous skies. A chaplain found himself upon the deck of the Emperor's flagship during the Unification Wars, hearing whispers of plans that history had long buried. Each vision ended with the same haunting detail: a silhouette beside the Emperor, always present, always silent, always unseen by those who later wrote the legends. And yet, this figure had influenced every choice, every victory, every sacrifice. History was not what it seemed. Faith had been built atop omission. Mortals aboard the ship reached their breaking point. Some tore off their insignia and begged for mercy from whatever power now revealed itself. Others clung to their rosaries until blood stained their palms. One priest, driven past sanity, began carving new symbols into his own flesh shapes resembling the luminous veins on the creature's armor. "I see the second light," he whispered, eyes wide with fevered devotion. "The hidden flame." The Emperor was not alone. For the first time since its founding, the chapter faced a schism not of doctrine, but of identity. Were they warriors of the Emperor alone, or servants of a cosmic order far beyond their understanding? And worse, had they unwittingly served both all along? The creature wandered the ship freely, unchallenged by locks or wards, appearing wherever fear grew deepest. To some, it offered calm, placing a hand upon their brow and granting a fleeting glimpse of peace. To others, it offered truth, raw, merciless truth that broke minds like brittle glass. It knelt beside a dying auxilia soldier and whispered visions of a future humanity reforged in its image. It stood in the armory and traced a finger along a bolt gun, murmuring that weapons forged for righteous slaughter could be repurposed for chains. Everywhere it went, it left transformation in its wake, not corruption, not purity, but something in between. Something human, and yet far beyond human. Something inevitable. The librarian, guided by a force he no longer dared name, entered the heart of the ship's astropathic choir. The astropaths lay in trance, their eyes white with terror as they beheld a truth carried through the immaterium like a storm front. A message had been sent across the warp, not by the Imperium, not by demons, but by the creature itself. He saw the signal radiate outward, reaching chapter after chapter, world after world, turning the warp into a lattice of luminous threads. It was not a call for worship, it was a call for awakening. Every psyker who received the message collapsed, screaming of a second throne and a hidden emperor. The librarian's heart withered with dread. For the creature was not spreading heresy. It was revealing history. The chapter master gathered his inner council, desperation cracking the edges of his voice. "We must destroy it," he said. "Whatever it is, whatever it thinks it is, we cannot allow it to live." But even as he spoke, The realization dawned that killing such a being might be impossible. The librarian warned that the creature existed partially outside linear time. The chaplains feared their faith was no longer a weapon they could wield. The apothecaries confessed the gene seed had evolved beyond their comprehension. Every option led to ruin. The chapter master lowered his head, for the first time understanding the monstrous weight of command. He had been chosen to lead warriors. He was not prepared to judge gods. When they finally confronted the creature in the ship's great hall, it stood beneath the banners of their proud history, each one rippling as though caught in a silent wind. "Why?" the librarian asked, voice thick with anguish. "Why reveal yourself now?" The creature looked at them with eyes holding the sorrow of a star collapsing. "Because the Imperium stands at the precipice of its own extinction," it said. "Because the Emperor's grand design requires a truth hidden since the dawn of the galaxy." It placed a hand upon its chest, where the remnants of the marked gene seed pulsed like a newborn heart. "And because I remember what he cannot, or will not." Suddenly its form convulsed, light tearing through its armor. Wings of radiant bladed light erupted from its back, not angelic, not demonic, but something entirely new. The ship shook as if the universe itself recoiled. And in a voice that resonated with the birth of suns, it declared, "I am the Emperor's forgotten half, and I have returned." The storm gathered in the eyes of every soul who had survived the revelations of the Black Vault, for they felt the quiet shift of destiny settling upon them like the weight of a fallen titan. In the deserted cloisters of the ruined shrine world, incense still clung to the air, mingling with the iron taste of old blood and the distant, rhythmic thunder of artillery far beyond the horizon. A single space marine knelt among the shattered icons, wrestling with the memory of vows spoken before he understood what they truly meant. He saw again the faces of brothers who had died for truths they never questioned, and he wondered, ultimately shamefully, if his own faith had been born from conviction or simply obedience. The silence answered him with a hollow resonance, as though the statues of saints weighed his doubts and found them wanting. When he rose, the shadows recoiled, yet followed. Far above the shrine world, aboard a derelict warship drifting like a corpse in the void, a librarian traced the fractured patterns etched into his mind by the artifact's psychic scream. Each line of pain revealed a new lattice of possibility, a map of sins hidden by the Imperium for millennia. He dared not speak what he had glimpsed, for even thought alone invited the predatory attention of things older than chaos itself. But he could not banish the vision of an emperor carved from contradictory truths, god, prisoner, tyrant, martyr, each aspect warring for dominance inside his fading mind. As he staggered through the echoing corridors, ghosts of slain crew whispered warnings, insisting that revelation was a curse bestowed only upon the damned. Still, he pressed forward, for he sensed the ship awakening to something that had waited ages to speak through the dark. On a distant moon where trenches stretched like scars across an ash-gray plain, mortal soldiers of the Astra Militarum clung to their final bunker, as Xeno's shrieks howled from the smoke. Yet the true terror in their eyes was not the enemy advancing upon them. It was the rumor that their own reinforcements had been ordered elsewhere, sacrificed for a greater strategic calculus no mortal mind was permitted to understand. Among them stood Commissar Lorraine, her uniform torn, her breath ragged, her faith hanging by the last frayed strands of duty. She recited the catechisms, but her voice faltered as explosions shook the ground. Her men looked to her for certainty, yet she recognized only fear in their faces, a mirror of the doubt in her own heart. When she raised her weapon to steady morale, her hand trembled not from weakness, but from the knowledge that belief could not survive truth unscathed. Deep below that same battlefield, in tunnels carved by forgotten civilizations, Tech Marines studied the skeletal remains of a machine older than the Imperium's founding. Its metal sang with a resonance that defied logic, each harmonic a whisper promising answers to questions humanity dared not ask. One Tech Marine extended a trembling mechadendrite toward a glyph pulsing faintly. The moment he touched it, a tidal surge of impossible data burst through him. Visions of humanity's past rewritten, of the Emperor kneeling before a council long erased from memory, of a pact shattered during the birth of the Imperium. Circuits overloaded, flesh blistered, yet the machine spirit did not release him. It held him, gentle and cruel, forcing him to witness the price that had been paid to forge the galaxy's greatest lie. When his brothers pulled him free, his voice was gone, replaced by static whispers, predicting the return of something humanity was never meant to behold. Across the Segmentum Solar, aboard a capital ship burning through warp-tide storms, a chaplain confronted his own dread in the solitude of the reliquary. The sacred scriptures he had carried for centuries now felt heavy with contradictions he could no longer dismiss. Every line he recited sounded foreign, hollow, as though written by hands that had never known the Emperor he had bled for. He pounded his Crozius against the deck, desperate to rekindle certainty, but the relic only hummed with an unspoken warning. Memories of fallen brothers drifted before him, men who had died screaming the Emperor's name without ever questioning if their faith had been manipulated. The chaplain's breath quivered. If loyalty had been forged upon deception, what meaning did sacrifice hold? But before the thought could fully form, a piercing psychic wail shuddered through the ship, shaking the reliquary and extinguishing the candles. Something in the warp had just spoken his name. On a forge world drowning in firestorms and titanic industry, an inquisitor interrogated a captured heretic prophet whose calm smile unnerved even the hardened Skittery guards. The prophet's words dripped like venom, each syllable crafted to coil around the inquisitor's mind. "Your faith is a chain," he whispered, "but the one who forged it was not who you believe." The inquisitor slammed him against the plasteel wall, demanding clarity, yet the prophet only laughed as molten sparks rained from the manufactorum above. Then he uttered a name 6 syllables long, one forbidden since the dawn of the Imperium. The inquisitor froze, for he had heard that name only once, hidden in sealed archives buried beneath Terra. The prophet leaned in, voice soft as falling ash. "He remembers you." Before the interrogation could continue, alarms blared. The entire sector trembled as something massive broke free beneath the planet's surface. On a feral world where night never ended, a space marine scout watched the horizon burn with unnatural auroras as psychic storms bled through the sky. His squad murmured litanies, their fear carefully concealed beneath training, yet he alone felt the pull of something calling from beyond the tree line. In his dreams, a towering figure wreathed in gold and shadow beckoned him with outstretched hands, one regal, one monstrous. When the scout awoke, he found the symbol of his chapter etched into the soil beside him, but twisted, warped into a shape that denied logic. His sergeant demanded explanation, but the scout could only whisper, "He sees us." Moments later, their Vox units crackled with a distorted message, a voice neither human nor machine ordering them to advance toward the dead forest. Their orders had been overridden by someone using the chapter master's authority, despite the master being light years away. Within a drifting asteroid monastery far from any imperial route, a sister of battle knelt at an altar carved from the remains of a saint whose miracles had shaped entire crusades. She sought solace, yet the bones beneath her hands vibrated faintly, as if trying to speak. When she pressed her ear closer, she heard a faint chorus, not praise, but mourning. The saint had foreseen heresy in the heart of mankind's greatest hope long before it manifested. Visions surged through her, worlds burning not by enemy hands, but by imperial decree, fleets redirected to silence those who had uncovered truths too dangerous to share. Tears burned her eyes, not from despair, but from fury. She rose with renewed purpose, ready to bear the burden of forbidden's knowledge. But as she turned toward the exit, the monastery lights flickered. The saint's skull cracked open, revealing a glowing sigil older than the Imperium itself. In the heart of a space hulk that drifted like a graveyard through the warp, a lone Terminator followed a trail of spectral echoes left by his fallen brethren. The air shimmered with trapped souls screaming through half-remembered battles. Each step felt heavier, as though the ship itself resented his intrusion. Then he reached the chamber where reality warped walls bending like molten wax, sigils pulsing with hateful life. At its center hovered a shard of crystalline darkness, humming with power. When he approached, memories not his own flooded him. Space Marines kneeling before a figure cloaked in radiant fire, swearing allegiance not to the Emperor, but to someone whose existence had been erased from Imperial history. Rage and disbelief collided within him. As he reached for the shard, his gauntlet passed through it, and a voice whispered inside his mind, "You serve the wrong master." On a storm-shattered desert world, a rogue trader uncovered a vault sealed with mechanisms that predated humanity spread across the stars. His retinue urged caution, but greed and curiosity drowned their warnings. When the vault opened, a torrent of cold white light erupted, revealing murals depicting the Emperor standing among beings equally divine, equals, not subjects. One mural showed his fall, not as a martyr's sacrifice, but as a sentence carried out by cosmic peers. The traitor felt his sanity quiver. If true, the Imperium rested upon a foundation of exile and rebellion, not salvation. Before he could process the revelation, shadows slithered across the walls, coalescing into a form shaped like both man and starborn beast. It whispered a warning in a language older than creation. The vault doors slammed shut. Only the echo of the warning escaped into the desert winds. In the depths of the warp, where thoughts became living storms, a renegade psyker drifted between shuddering currents of raw emotion. She had glimpsed fragments of the same truth unfolding across the galaxy, pulled into her mind by forces she could not escape. Each revelation twisted her perception further. The Emperor's godhood ignited not by ascension, but by deliberate design. The Primarchs forged not as sons, but as weapons. Humanity guided not by destiny, but by a debt owed to a forgotten pantheon. As she screamed against the torrent, the warp responded with laughter, not mocking, but expectant, as though awaiting her next realization. Then she saw it, a new constellation forming in the warp's heart, shaped like a crowned figure rising. The sight broke her. She clawed at her face, whispering, "He is waking." Every demon in the warp fell silent. And far away, on Terra itself, a tremor rippled through the golden throne, so slight that the custodians dismissed it as settling machinery. But deep within the labyrinth beneath the palace, where no human foot had stepped for millennia, a sealed door exhaled a breath of ancient air. Symbols long dormant flared with ghostly fire. A single oath, carved into stone at the dawn of the Imperium, dissolved into dust. And from behind the door came the faintest sound, metal shifting, chains straining, a heartbeat impossibly slow yet unmistakably alive. The custodians above felt nothing. The priests noticed no change. But across the galaxy, every soul touched by the earlier revelations shuddered as if hearing a distant, forgotten name echo through their bones. Something imprisoned had stirred, and in the quiet after that single heartbeat, the galaxy dared not breathe. The heartbeat beneath Terra throbbed again louder, heavier, reverberating through the labyrinth like the knell of a god's awakening. In the same breath, across star systems torn open by prophecy, warriors of every creed felt their vision blur as reality folded inward. The kneeling space marine in the shattered shrine looked up sharply as the statues around him cracked from crown to base, shedding marble like burnt flesh. He felt an unseen hand grip his soul, wrenching him from doubt into a terrible clarity. Destiny had chosen him, not for salvation, but for witness. He stepped into the storm beyond the shrine, armor humming with an ancient resonance that did not belong to his chapter. Above him, the sky split as a spear of golden light stabbed across the horizon, the first sign of the final convergence. And he knew then that whatever rose beneath Terra would demand a cost too great for anyone life to bear. The derelict warship drifting in the void shuddered as the librarian collapsed, psychic agony ripping through his nerves like molten wire. The shard of Forbidden's revelation embedded within his mind flared, exposing the last veil of the Imperium's oldest secret. In that instant, he saw thousands of years collapse into one terrible truth. The Emperor's imprisonment had not been enforced by the forces of chaos, nor by the treachery of suns, but by a final act of self-denial, a sealing of a power too vast to unleash. Now the lock trembled. Now the prison cracked. Warp entities screamed as the veil strained. The ship's dead awakened in flickering echoes, their phantoms chanting warnings the living could not decipher. The librarian clawed at his own skull, desperate to abort the truth, but the knowledge burrowed deeper, rewriting his soul. He staggered toward the Vox, struggling to speak a warning he knew would be far too late. On the ash-choked moon, Commissar Lorraine felt the ground tremble as the Xenos offensive faltered mid-charge, their shrieks turning to panicked wails. Her soldiers stared in horror as the frozen horizon rippled like water, revealing a towering silhouette wreathed in both blinding radiance and howling shadow. Lorraine dropped her last pistol, unable to breathe as the figure's presence pressed down on her chest, crushing her doubt into dust. Her faith flared violently painful, consuming, as she realized the Emperor's will was not absent, but roaring, rising, reshaping the battlefield. Yet something in that radiance twisted at the edges, a second influence intertwined like a parasite entwined with a titan. When the silhouette extended its hand toward her, she felt her soul strain between devotion and terror. Her soldiers cried out as their bodies turned to silhouettes in the glare, their voices swallowed by a single echoing command. No one could tell whether it was salvation or judgment. Deep beneath the trenches, the ancient machine's reactor roared to life, splitting the ground with seismic fury. The tech marine scrambled back as the construct rose from its crypt, shedding centuries of dust. Its form was humanoid, yet impossibly vast, forged in an era when humanity knelt not to gods, but to truths too complex for belief. Its eyes ignited with twin suns of logic and prophecy. It regarded the tech marines with a sorrow that machines should not possess. Words thundered through their skulls, not spoken, but imposed. Your empire was built to resist what is now awakening. Failure was foretold. With one colossal stride, the construct walked toward the surface. The tunnels collapsed behind it. The surviving tech marines gazed in awe and despair, realizing this was not a weapon, they had awakened an emissary. And whatever it intended to meet above would decide the fate of more than the Imperium. Aboard the storm-racked capital ship, the chaplain raced through smoke-choked corridors as the psychic wail intensified, morphing into a chant, the same forbidden name the heretic prophet had spoken. He burst into the command deck just as the warp tore open above the vessel, spilling tendrils of incandescent ruin across the void. A golden specter stepped through the breach, neither demon nor angel, but a fusion of both, shaped like the memory of the Emperor, twisted by a reflection older than Terra. The crew fell to their knees in contradictory worship and fear. The chaplain raised his Crozius, torn between adoration and the instinct to destroy what defied his creed. The specter reached for him, fingertips brushing the relic. The Crozius exploded into fragments, each shard rotating in orbit around the apparition like shattered planets. "Faith binds," the specter whispered, "but truth unbinds." And with that, every scripture he had ever memorized burned away. On the Forge world, the prophet's whispered name ignited the crust beneath the manufactorum. Molten fissures split open, revealing titanic coils of a buried creature awakening from enforced slumber. The Inquisitor screamed orders that no one heard. Alarms were drowned beneath the roar of a being whose existence violated every imperial doctrine. Its emergence shattered megastructures, flinging armored titans like toys. The prophet laughed as the ceiling collapsed, revealing the starless sky above. "Your empire feared this one most," he hissed as the Inquisitor dragged him from falling debris. "Not chaos, not Xenos. Him." The ground convulsed as the Colossus rose fully an astral leviathan, scales shimmering with the symbols of a pre-imperial pantheon. Its gaze swept the surface, pausing as if sensing another presence awakening elsewhere. The Inquisitor stared in paralyzed awe, realizing the Emperor's greatest enemy was not rebellion, but memory. On the Eternal Night world, the scout and his squad entered the dead forest, compelled by orders they now realized were forged from something beyond mortal command. As they crossed into the trees, the auroras overhead collapsed into a vortex, dragging light and shadow into a spiraling wound in the sky. The twisted sigil they had discovered reappeared on every tree trunk, burning brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. Suddenly, the ground split, and spectral figures rose from the roots, ancient warriors, bearing armor predating any known chapter. Their eyes glowed with judgment. The sergeant raised his bolter, but the phantoms merely pointed toward the sky where the vortex thundered. Two silhouettes descending, one radiant, one abyssal. The scout felt his breath freeze. The figures mirrored the duality within his visions. "Choose," the phantoms whispered, but he could not. The sky tore fully open, claiming the battlefield in blinding, apocalyptic light. Within the asteroid monastery, the Sister of Battle watched the saint's skull erupt into a fountain of white flame that traced sigils across the chapel walls. Each burning line unfolded a secret. The saint had foreseen the Emperor's return, but not in the form the Imperium desired. She saw visions of armies kneeling to a figure both divine and corrupted, radiance interwoven with madness. Weeping, she raised her bolter toward the blazing skull, uncertain whether to preserve or destroy the prophecy. But the skull turned toward her, jaw opening as if to speak. A single word spilled from its burning mouth, echoing with the weight of destiny. "Prepare." The monastery shuddered violently as the asteroid's engines activated on their own, thrusting it toward Terra. The sister fell to her knees, terrified of the mission forced upon her. The saint's flame dimmed, leaving only ash and the silhouette of an uncertain future. On the space hulk, the Terminator confronted the crystalline shard once more, as the chamber twisted into a vortex of fractured time. The voices of forgotten oaths screamed through the walls. He reached into the shard, gripping the truth lodged within it, and reality bent backward. He saw two emperors, one enthroned on the golden throne, the other walking the galaxy as a mortal titan, forging alliances beyond human comprehension. One bound by duty, the other by purpose. One imprisoned, the other erased. The shard shattered in his hand, releasing a pulse that hurled him across the chamber. When he rose, the world had changed. The space hulk was no longer silent. Footsteps echoed through the corridors, half metal, half divine, approaching slowly. The Terminator readied his hammer, knowing he faced not a foe, but a choice. And choices, he realized, were the true weapons of gods. In the vault on the desert world, the rogue traitor faced the star-born beast alone. The murals glowed with violent life, rewriting themselves as the being spoke. It revealed that the Emperor's greatest sin was not creating the Imperium. It was abandoning the cosmic order he once upheld, severing humanity from its rightful place among ascendant species. The traitor trembled as the being stepped closer, its voice softening. "He rises broken. Help him remember, or watch him fall into the same shadow he fled." The traitor's retinue pounded on the sealed doors, but he no longer heard them. He stared into eyes older than the galaxy and realized the being feared what was awakening as much as it demanded it. And in that fear was an unspoken truth. Even gods could tremble. The renegade psyker drifted deeper into the warp's living storm as a constellation of burning symbols assembled overhead. Each star pulsed with the echoes of revelations unfolding across reality. Her mind cracked with every vision of emperors split into dual beings, of ancient pantheons awakening, of humanity poised between rebirth and annihilation. As the constellation ignited, its shape solidified into the form of a colossal crowned figure stretching across the warp. Its eyes opened golden, grief-stricken, furious. "Not yet," the figure whispered, voice shaking eternity. A tidal wave of power slammed into the psyker, flinging her through layers of unreality. She felt her soul peeling apart as she whispered her final understanding. The Emperor was rising, but not alone and not unchanged. And deep beneath Terra, the sealed door finally groaned open. The chains snapped one by one, each break echoing across the galaxy in psychic aftershocks. Blinding radiance poured from the chamber, illuminating statues of silent watchers who had guarded the forgotten prisoner for 10,000 years. A figure stepped forward, draped in golden ruin, eyes burning with eons of withheld power. Not the Emperor as the galaxy remembered, nor the being the Pantheon had once exiled, but something new, forged from suffering, faith, and revelation. The golden throne trembled as the custodians felt the air thin. Across the Imperium, visions erupted, saints weeping blood, machines chanting hymns in reversed logic, psychers collapsing in awe. The figure raised its head, sensing its reflection awakening elsewhere in the warp. And as its first breath shook the palace foundations, a single horrifying truth settled upon the galaxy. Something eternal had shifted, and its meaning was yet to be revealed. The chamber beneath Terra glowed with the afterbirth of impossible power as the newly awakened figure stepped into a galaxy trembling with fractured truth. Yet the roar of revelation soon ebbed, leaving only the echo of what had risen and the deeper echo of what had been lost. Across the Imperium, warriors who had felt the heartbeat of awakening now felt instead a cold stillness, as if reality itself held its breath. The Space Marine who once knelt among shattered icons stood upon the ruins of the Shrine World, watching dust swirl through broken arches where saints once glowed with certainty. He searched the heavens for the golden flare that had torn them open, but the sky was quiet now, dim, heavy. He wondered whether he had witnessed salvation or merely the first tremor of a greater collapse. His armor hummed weakly, as though remembering a song that had already faded from existence. And in the silence, he realized no prophecy would tell him what came next. The derelict warship drifted through the void, its lights extinguished, its ghosts silent. The librarian lay slumped beside the shattered Vox, his final warning carved into the deck by psychic fire, a message no living soul remained to read. Through the broken viewport, distant stars flickered with muted resignation, as though they too had witnessed something too immense to bear and now dimmed themselves in mourning. The warp was quiet unnaturally, so its storms calmed, its nightmares retreating into depths no psycher dared imagine. It felt like the universe pausing between heartbeats. The librarian's final vision lingered in the metal around him, etched not by tools but by trauma. Two silhouettes merging, diverging, merging again in an eternal struggle for identity. Somewhere the truth had been reshaped. Somewhere a legend had stepped beyond its own myth. And yet the galaxy drifted on, unknowing, unprepared, unchanged in all the ways that mattered. On the ash-choked moon, Commissar Liraine walked alone across a battlefield of frozen silhouettes, her fallen soldiers preserved in the last light of the celestial apparition. No wind stirred to free them, no voices remained to honor them. She carried her tattered commissarial coat like a shroud, its fabric heavy with soot, blood, and the weight of unanswerable faith. She knelt beside a soldier she once promised to protect and placed a trembling hand upon the statue-like form. The figure's final expression, terror mixed with awe, etched itself into her soul. Was this the price of devotion? Or merely the cost of existing in a galaxy that demanded belief yet offered no assurance? She whispered a prayer that dissolved before reaching the air, unsure whether prayer meant anything now. When she rose, the horizon was empty. No golden silhouette, no divine decree. Only the lonely echo of a choice she never truly made. Deep beneath the trench world, the mountain-sized construct reached the surface and stood still, its colossal head turning toward Terra as though listening for a summons it no longer received. The ground beneath its feet cooled, its reactor dimming, its purpose unfulfilled. The tech marines who survived its awakening watched from a distance, too reverent and too broken to approach. One dared whisper, What becomes of a messenger when its message no longer matters? No answer came. The construct lowered itself slowly, folding into a kneeling posture facing the heavens. Its glowing eyes dimmed to embers, as though honoring an ending too sacred to behold. Around it, the once seething battlefield calmed. Even the Xenos remnants retreated in startled silence. For the first time in centuries, the world heard nothing, not war, not machines, not faith, only the quiet resignation of a titan who had seen the turning of an age and accepted its own obsolescence. Aboard the capital ship, the chaplain wandered the silent halls, clutching the shattered fragments of his Crozius. The specter that had unmade it was gone, leaving only scorched sigils burned into the bulkheads, symbols neither imperial nor heretical, but something sorrowfully indistinguishable. He entered the reliquary where once he had knelt with unwavering certainty. The candles were dark, the scriptures lay blank, their ink vanished. He placed the fragments of his relic upon the altar and bowed his head. In the emptiness, a question formed unbidden. What is faith when the truth refuses to be known? He inhaled the cold void where sanctity once lived, and felt a strange peace settle over him. Not clarity, but acceptance. The universe would not answer him. The Emperor, whatever form he now inhabited, would not speak. The silence was its own benediction, and he embraced it like a final rite. On the Forge world, the colossal Leviathan that had torn through the planet's crust vanished into the void, leaving behind a landscape melted into glass. The Inquisitor stood among the ruins of Manufactorum Theta Prime, the prophet's corpse at his feet. He stared at the empty sky, waiting for another sign, another quake, another truth clawing its way into the light, but nothing came. The planet's once roaring furnaces sputtered out, leaving factories cold for the first time since their forging. The silence was unbearable. He wondered if he had played any role in the fate that unfolded or merely stood as witness to the unmaking of myths. With trembling hands, he activated his rosette. The signal pulsed across the galaxy, not as a warning, but as a question one the Inquisition itself might never answer. If gods can fall to doubt, why should men pretend certainty? The rosette flickered, then died. On the eternal night world, the scout awoke within the dead forest, the vortex gone, the sky restored to its starless quiet. His squad lay unconscious beside him, breathing shallowly but alive. The spectral warriors had vanished, leaving only faint impressions in the earth. He touched the twisted sigil burned into the ground, now cool and lifeless. Its meaning had fled with the light. He felt no divine presence, no calling, only the ache of something unfinished. He staggered to his feet and looked toward the horizon where two silhouettes had once descended. Now only darkness lingered, empty and indifferent. The scout wondered if he had witnessed the rebirth of a god or merely the reflection of humanity's ancient longing for one. He whispered a question that had no listener. When divinity fractures, do mortals break with it or endure in spite of it? Within the drifting asteroid monastery, the Sister of Battle knelt among the ashes of the saint, the engines that once hurled the asteroid toward Terra now silent. They had ceased mid-course, their will spent, their purpose unspoken. The glowing sigil on the chapel wall had faded to a faint scar. She touched it, feeling warmth beneath the stone fate, mourning like the memory of a final blessing. She gathered the ashes in a ceremonial urn and placed it upon the altar, offering the saint a quiet prayer of gratitude and sorrow. Then she looked out the viewport into the shimmering void. Somewhere, a god had risen or fallen. Somewhere, a truth had fractured or healed. She would never know which. But she carried the memory nonetheless, a lone pilgrim bearing witness to an age's slow unraveling. She whispered a vow not of certainty, only of endurance. On the Space Hulk, the Terminator found himself alone once more, the footsteps that once approached now silenced by the closing of a temporal wound. The shard was gone. The chamber was still. He pressed his massive gauntlet against the wall, feeling the echo of what he had seen, of two emperors, of merging destinies, of rewritten truths. The vision haunted him, yet it no longer commanded him. He walked through the Hulk's empty halls, passing armor left by brothers long dead, banners torn by wars now forgotten. The silence enfolded him like a shroud. He spoke a single vow into the void. "I will remember." And the Hulk, ancient and dying, accepted that promise with a groan of shifting metal. Sometimes he realized the only victory was remembrance. On the desert world, the rogue traitor emerged from the vault as the doors slid open on their own. The star-born beast long vanished. His retinue rushed toward him, but he waved them back, unable to speak the truth he had seen. The murals within the vault had reverted to dust, the chamber's light extinguished. He gazed at the twin suns sinking behind the dunes, their fading rays painting the desert in mournful gold. He wondered if humanity was meant to rise alongside gods or in defiance of them. He wondered if the Emperor himself had wondered once. A soft wind stirred the sand, erasing his footprints. He whispered to the dying light, more confession than proclamation. "We endure, even when we understand nothing." The desert swallowed the words gently. In the warp's hollowed quiet, the renegade psyker floated weightless, her body fading into luminous threads. The crowned constellation had dissolved, its shape dispersed among the stars like the ashes of a forgotten god. She no longer felt pain or fear, only the faint ache of mysteries glimpsed but not grasped. Her final thought drifted outward, gentle as a sigh. Was the Emperor rising, or was the galaxy simply waking to the truth of itself? The question had no answer. It dissolved into the fabric of the immaterial, a final note in a symphony without resolution. And the warp, for once, did not answer back. And on Terra, beneath the shadow of the golden throne, the awakened figure stood alone in the vast chamber of watchers. The radiance surrounding it flickered, shrinking until only a faint halo remained. Its gaze lifted toward the throne above, toward the silent form bound to its machinery. Neither moved. Neither spoke, yet the air trembled with unspoken understanding. A choice had been made, whether by gods, by fate, or by the slow erosion of eternity itself. Outside, the sun rose over the palace, its light subdued, reverent. The galaxy felt the shift but did not yet know its meaning. And in the quiet that followed, quieter than death, quieter than dawn, the age turned its final page. If you have walked this far through ruin, revelation, and whispered truths, then stand witness with us. Like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below so the chronicle may continue.